Okay, so I'd just like to start this video off by saying that I have an idea for a new show on watches, but before I get to that, I thought I would get to what are the essential ideas or considerations to make when purchasing a watch or multiple watches, and should it be a gift or should you buy it yourself, stuff like this. So I think my old photos that I've posted on YouTube, all those watch videos of just the photos are all my old watches, and I think that should give me a little bit of credit anyways. And any questions or topics that are of interest to the viewers or that come up during questions as I give my information here, anything that comes up is on the table and interests me about watches. So I consider myself a bit of a WIS or WIS or watch idiot savant, but I intend someday to take the time zone watch school, which is I think 2 courses. And now in Canada there's only 1 actual watch school, whereas after World War II I believe there were 6. So it's in Quebec and it's a little far from here. So there is a local clockmaker in town that I've thought about volunteering with him, but I just don't have the time these days. So the first consideration is quartz versus mechanical, I think. So let's talk about quartz to begin with. Quartz is great for low maintenance. You don't have to wear it every day. It's lighter. It's usually more accurate than a mechanical watch. It's cheaper to buy, usually, and it's cheaper to service. By that I mean that really a quartz watch doesn't need service until after at least 10 years, maybe longer. So it's much cheaper to service, and then even at that time when they do get serviced, it is easier to service. Water will completely destroy the movement. If that's the case, usually it's just a full movement replacement. So in that case, parts may not be accessible down the road in the future. Therefore, at that time, replacement is usually better than repair. So many times with a quartz watch, it's just easier to replace the watch than repair it, but generally they don't break down that much. The other thing is that once you own a mechanical watch, one that has a beat and gears and pinions and feels like it's been engineered somewhat, the quartz watch sort of seems spiritless. It's kind of like, my fridge or my microwave or my phone. It's just an electronic piece, just an electronic tool or device. So it's just like wearable technology, so to speak. I guess a mechanical one is too, but there's just no sort of symbiotic relationship with the user. It's electronic, it has batteries, so even ones that have this perpetual sort of thing like solar power or EcoDrive or these various kinetic things, they still charge a rechargeable battery, so it's still a quartz watch based on battery. And so they'll have lights and alarms and even sonories or minute repeaters or chronographs, and they're very capable, and I think they make a great first gift. Another consideration in the quartz is analog versus digital. Normally with mechanical watches, other than a few vintage watches or maybe some high-end ones, you don't really see the digital watches where it shows digits. But with quartz watches, many of them are digital. So you want to think, do I want hands to indicate the hours and minutes? So that's analog, or do I want digital, which is just digits? I'll make a video about that coming up later. Okay, so as for mechanical watches, this is where I find there's more passion or more spirit involved. So I'm not against quartz in any way, but it's just another electronic device in my life that if I want to go back to my primal ways or to years past or a bygone era, mechanical watches is where it's at. And the definition of mechanical watch means there's gears and it's a spring that's wound basically, and so the spring unwinds, but this is controlled through the gear train and then through the escapement and the balance wheel. So the balance is like the beat of the drum or just the beat in general. So something winds the spring. So either it's your hands turning it, which means it's a manual wind, or there's a weighted rotor. So the rotor spins around and winds the spring. And so that's called an automatic. So it's the same thing, but one winds itself. So the beauty of these things is that they need you. It's a symbiotic relationship. Like when you're walking down the street, you're swinging your arms back and forth and you feel like you're charging or winding your watch. And so it can't exist without you, and it's a tool that you can look at and enjoy. And it, of course, tells you the time, and usually with analog, it does a lot of other things, like you can tell where south is in the northern hemisphere. So the rate, I said with the quartz that the quartz usually has better timekeeping, but the rate can be controlled with positions with mechanical watches. So you can have the crown up or crown down, or face up, face down, for instance. And so, in fact, if you can manipulate those positions when you leave it at night or whatever, you can adjust the timing and keep it better than a quartz watch, in fact. And I've actually done that, and it's pretty neat to keep it on exactly the time.gov time. So there's mathematical gearing and ratios going on with those gears and the release of the mechanics to perfectly divide time. The microcosm going on in there, all those little gears symbiotically working together within themselves. And usually that goes to my point on displaybacks, and I'll make another video about that, but I'm a big proponent of displaybacks. Another thing to consider is that it's expensive to repair or service mechanical watches. Usually it's about $500 generally, but if you're getting into high end, it's more than that. But it is a throwback, and the way I look at it is it's about $80 to $100 a year of ownership for maintenance, which isn't that bad, so $10 a month. It lasts up to a lifetime or longer. They maintain their value. Parts can be made if it's a popular movement, like let's say the Valjoux 750 or the 2892, the ETA 2892. Stuff like this, those little gears that break down or whatever. The watchmakers can actually make parts if they need to, but for these really popular movements, the mainstream movements, there'll be many parts available for years to come. So that's one good thing about buying a sort of mass-produced movement. You know, time is measured in moments. So when we pause to think about it, for instance, we enjoy that very moment. So why not enjoy those reflective moments? Perhaps this is what music is as well, with its breakdown of time into beats. The drummer or the beat is created in music, and then people make synchronous sound waves creatively on that beat, like using that beat together. And so I think a watch does something similar. All the different parts move together, and it actually makes a beautiful sound. It actually makes a beautiful clicking sound when the lever goes back and forth. Within the mechanical, you have the manual wind versus automatic. And I think both are great, and the manual wind isn't a chore at all. There's plenty of downtime during the day to think about and play with the watch, and so usually when I woke up in the morning, I believe, when I woke up in the morning, I wound my watch every day. And I didn't think it mattered if you wound it in the morning when you woke up, if you wound it at noon, or if you wound it in the evening before you went to bed. But then a watchmaker once told me that it's best to wind it in the morning because you're moving around and you're active during the day, and that's when you want to have the spring fully wound. Therefore the isochronous movement of the timing would be minimized. So I was actually doing it right, but there's plenty of time during a day to wind the watch. And you know what, many times when I had Speedmasters, I would just wind them anyways. I just keep them fully wound. I would just wind them in the morning, wind them at 10 o'clock in the morning, wind them at noon hour, just whenever I felt like it or when I looked down, or I just kept it fully wound. In my opinion, if you are going to buy a mechanical watch, however, I think that you should have a display case back, the sapphire, or even a mineral glass if it's lower end, a mineral glass case back, but a display case back to see the movement. And so that's why you're paying the money, is for this nice movement, and it's a real conversation starter, and you get to learn different parts. And for instance, when I push the chronograph, I like to see the different parts move and then learn those part names. It's something to do. And so within display case backs, with a manual wind, there's no rotor, so it's a unhinged or unhindered view of the movement, so it's great. But with the rotor, sometimes they're skeletonized or there's some cutouts, and I think they look nice as well. So I really like having an automatic watch with a rotor that has some cutouts. The one thing I didn't like when I had a Panerai, I didn't like the screw down crown. It was a radiomere, and I didn't like the screw down crown for a manual wind. I just thought it was weak. I have to wind it every day, but I thought that would wear out the case tube or the crown tube, whatever the crown screws onto that's connected to the case, the threaded piece. I thought that if I have to unscrew this in and out every day, that it's going to sort of wear out that tube. An automatic watch, an automatic mechanical watch, winds itself as you walk and move your wrists. And so the rotor that spins around turns and winds a spring, and that spring unwinds on the gear train. In that case, the springs usually only last about 2 days, so 48 hours or 50 hours. So if you have two watches, you can wear one day and the other one the next day, and both watches will stay wound. But if you have 3 watches, you can't go 3-day intervals. So you need a watch winder, or you can just let them unwind and not work. So I think, as far as having an automatic, it's nice having just one that I'm not fighting. But in the past, with, for instance, the Girard-Perregaux Seahawk, it was nice to have a power reserve so I could see how much was remaining when I had multiple watches, so that I could determine when to wear the watch. So in that case, with multiple automatic mechanical watches, it's nice to have a power reserve complication. So that's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in.